So, what we're going to talk about is bridging the gap between, um, we'll start the far end. One end I think would be traditional training where pop, jerk, shock, and the dog doesn't get a say, and the dog just has to comply, even if the dog doesn't know how to comply. And the other end of this coin, where the dog gets to consent for nail cutting, gets to consent for being patted.
And force free, the dog chooses what they want to do.
Yeah, completely force free. So this would be Bob Bailey's dolphins in the ocean that he's training, they get the weekends off and they can go swim out and go cruise around. And then they come back on Monday and they're available for working with the Navy. And they literally do that. I know one of my trainers has a friend from college that works with those dolphins. So that's the level of force-free training you can get to. So we want to talk about bridging that gap, because right now in dog training, it's a question that usually ends up in a war, and we don't want it to be a war. So what are common sayings in dog training that drive you crazy?
I can start because I have one that absolutely, it grinds me the wrong way every time I hear it. So when somebody's asking about my services and they say, how do I train, and name the behavior out of my dog? So how do I train counter surfing out of my dog? How do I train jumping on people out of my dog? So yeah, that one really, really gets me. And there's a few others, but that's probably the worst I hear most regularly.
Do you have one that gets you, Sarah?
See, okay. Well, I feel like I'm in a weird spot because
you're in the hunting world.
I think it's a little bit counterproductive sometimes to get hung up on wording.
Oh, because I totally agree.
If I'm talking to people, I'll say, sure, yeah, I broke George of chasing small game when we're doing other stuff. Broke, which people are like, oh God. But I don't use force for him for hunting training. It's just a word that puts us all on the same page.
People understand.
It's terminology that in the hunt training that they're going to understand. You're using a common language.
Or like some of the drills, like they call it like force to pile, force fetch. I'm not going to be like, I did a force free fetch and a force free pile drill. I'm just like, yeah, he's force fetched, whatever. Well, actually, I don't say that because that is my sticking point. Oh, I found a term I don't like. But I'll say like, oh yeah, I worked on force to pile this weekend. If he doesn't go to the pile, that's fine. We make it easier. We make it more fun until he goes to the pile.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I didn't have any terms that messed with me, but force fetch, I guess, is one that I'm stuck on.
Well, and I totally agree with you on I try not to get hung up about it. But if you think about everything in life in general, we all have things that just rub us the wrong way. Mm-hmm. So we're human. Things are going to bother us when we see or hear something that goes against our beliefs. That's just the way we are. So that's why we wanted to kind of start with that question. So
yeah,
Cindy,
it's a really good question.
Do you have an answer for that one?
Yeah, I think what bothers me, it's not necessarily what's said, it's what's done. It's when you see somebody that's obviously doing something that they're later going to have to correct, not fixing the problem immediately. And I think a really good example of this was a local trainer who claims to know all, and she actually hasn't been training that long. She's got a whole bunch of other cognitive issues, but she never says what they are. And one page she's saying she's disabled and another page she's not, and she's this great dog trainer. And, but then she goes and puts IPG titles on her dogs that she's using as service dogs. That's just a huge issue for me in general. I don't think it's right. I think it's unsafe. I don't think it matters who you are. The ADA says, no, you don't do it. But she came out to a training session that I was at, and she had a new puppy that was a Dalmatian, and she wanted to play puppy pong. Great game. Totally am for it. And I got involved in it. And she's trying to distribute treats to everybody, and everybody had their own treats. But rather than either letting people use their own treats or leaving the puppy boxed until she gave everybody treats, or, you know, maintaining some way for the puppy, she let the puppy stand there and beg on its hind legs while she was distributing treats. Then I found out she was this great service dog trainer. And to me, just the whole image of that was like, you're doing what? You know, and you're claiming to be a service dog trainer, and you're going to have to go back. And she puts on her website, I use shock collars when I'm at the beach because I don't want my dogs to take off. So it's just, you know, when I see that kind of thing, it's like, it makes me cringe, because I know her dogs could be trained so much better, so much easier.
I get that point totally, which is brings up another one for me, is even just the term balanced trainer, because people are not balanced trainers, and if they try to be balanced, they usually end up screwing the dogs. You either use aversives or you don't. You can't do it both ways. You can't have that cake and eat it too, you know, because the dogs just end up confused. Like, you can use aversives and still use treats. That doesn't make you balanced. You know what I mean? You're still driving your fear-based activities in your dog sometimes, and maybe reward-based activities sometimes, which is like generally the description of balanced. But those are the dogs that get confused and shut down. I see it time and time again. So that term does kind of rub me the wrong way too.
I don't totally agree with you there, because I feel like there has to be a catch-all term between purely old school Kohler method of dog training, compulsion trainer, and positive reinforcement only. I think there's okay.
No, I agree. There's that in between ground.
There's an in between.
I understand that.
But
there are some that are very
the
reasonable.
trainers that can do it effectively aren't as common as people think they are.
Yeah.
I think.
I just wish it had a different name for that, you know, in between.
Yeah.
Because the word balanced, I don't know, it just rubs me the wrong way there.
And probably most of them are closer to being a force-free trainer than they realize, is my thought, because most of us don't want our animals to be harmed in any way if we can teach a different way. But if you're teaching recalls and heels with a shock collar, and then you're turning around and teaching tasks with a clicker, you're going to confuse your dog. What am I supposed to be doing? And, you know, am I supposed to be listening to this person, or am I going to get a zap? And I think there's got to be a balance and a crossover point, because if there's not, people aren't going to start crossing over and learning. And I think it's a shame that so many, and it happens so often, that positive reinforcement trainers, as soon as they get in front of, you know, they get in front of a room, and instead of saying, if there's somebody that speaks up and says something about being a balanced trainer, they immediately attack them, or vice versa.
Right.
I think
which is kind of getting into our question 3. So shall we do question 2?
I think we should do question 2, because that's going to be where we're going to, okay. what is your gut response to those types of comments, the ones that just get you?
You want me to start?
Yeah, I'm not going to start because you said I was supposed to be hosting.
Yeah, I asked if you wanted me to start.
Yeah, I want you to start.
Okay. So for me, okay, this is kind of when you were just mentioning crossover. This is crossover. So originally that used to just grind my gears to the point where I had to say, no, we don't talk that way. I will not help you train that behavior out of your dog. I will help you train your dog to do better behaviors, but I won't train that behavior out of your dog. That was my gut response. So I've learned and I've grown since then. So I want to make sure that we touch on that. So, I mean, we all start somewhere. And when I first, like, I've really taught mostly force free for probably 30 some years. I just did not know the term or understand what it really meant. And there may have been a little bit of alpha stuff in there long ago, but I was basically in that crossover stage, getting towards, more and more and more force free all the time. So as a trainer, I kind of had that same process to go through. I knew my ways were proven scientifically. I knew my ways were proven through all the dogs I've worked with. So that made me eager and overexcited to show everybody my ways. But everybody isn't ready to accept that. Sometimes they need to make smaller steps. So over the course of time, I've learned to, like, even if my gut impulse is to say that, I've learned to just like, okay, so this is the starting plane they're at. Where can I go from here? And how can I help them see a better way to do things instead of thinking of it that way? So my gut response to the response I want, basically.
Okay. What about you, Sarah?
Oh. I guess so. Just to be clear, like, I'm not fundamentally or morally opposed to physical punishment for dogs. So I'm probably more leaning towards evil, scary, horrible than most people in this group. But like 99% of what I do is force free. I just don't associate with the term.
Nope, you're fine.
You're fine. You're right where you should be.
I just feel like there's, like what Cindy was saying, the idea that the force free is superior and we should shame other people is not cool with me at all. So my general approach tends to be like, I'd rather show than tell. So if my dog, like, he went out and just crushed a hunt test, he was phenomenal the other week. And I was proud of him. And people said, wow, he's so good, blah, blah, blah. And someone said, like, oh, how long did it take to force fetch him? And that's the only one, I guess, that like gets me. So I was just like, I didn't. So 0 months, 0 days. I just didn't bother. It wasn't worth it to me. And they were like, huh, that's weird. And I was like, yeah, it worked though. And they're like, oh, okay, what'd you do? And I was like, oh, I just praised him, gave him treats, whatever. And they were like, oh, weird. How long did that take? And I was like, not very long, It's quick. But yeah.
So for me, I'm going to read this again because just that's how my brain's working tonight.
That's okay. I kind of answered question 2 and 3 at the same time. So I think we could go ahead and give your answer for question 2 and 3. And then we can move on to what we all seem to want to talk about anyways, even though it's not part of the question.
So I think my gut response to, when people are not, my phone's right here, that's why I'm looking over there. When people, my gut response when people are not receptive is I try and back it off and meet at their level. And I don't, if I'm working with my dog in a class, like I took Nick through 3 layers, their beginning, intermediate, and advanced pet classes and for manners. Well, we were doing some of the stuff that we were doing in the classes, but we were doing other things outside the classes. We weren't necessarily practicing what we were learning in class, or I was teaching it a different way, or we came to class knowing it. And he was always, other than not getting along with Dobby, and he would, he knew the skills he needed to know. And the reason I did that was not because I don't trust the trainer, Sarah. It's just because I knew how I wanted him handled. He's my dog. And I knew how I wanted to teach him. And rather than just get into a kerfuffle with somebody about it, I'd rather start and just show, okay, well, this is how I'm going to, this is what I'm going to do at home. I'll do it. And then I'll show up with class, because you get like a handout saying what you're going to learn, when you're going to learn. But when I meet somebody that's new to them, I don't want to come off as a holy roller of dog training. And I think that's where we have the divide. We have the people that think you have to have compulsive training, and we have the people that think you can't have the compulsive training. And they're kind of like the vegans and the meat eaters. And, I don't think or the Christians and the Jews used to be, there's a big line there, and you do not cross. And if you do, you start attacking. And I don't think that's good for the dogs. I don't think that's good for dog training. And I don't think it's going to be of benefit for anybody in the future. I think the best option is to meet people where they are and help them, if they want your input, like you had with the, how'd you teach, how long did it teach force fetch? Well, I didn't. That would be my answer with Nick too, because he's been playing fetch over distance with various items since he was a puppy, and he does retrieving on a regular basis for all kinds of things. So I think it's a matter of meeting them where they're at, and maybe we use the same words that they're using. Maybe I have a client right now that uses the word commands. Well, I could jump down her throat every time she uses the word command, because I want her to start using the word cues, but I want her to do it when she's comfortable, when she understands what we're doing and why we're doing what we're doing. Because she was actually told by Donna Hill that this dog would not make a service dog, and to contact me about possibly how to train the dog to be a service dog. So that was
I totally
a big call.
agree.
And if we can meet people where they're at, so being more of a concepts trainer, because I felt on the journey to concepts trainer, I felt like I went from being full-on traditional trainer that I learned in the 70s when I was in 4-H, and we popped and we jerked and we didn't use prong collars. We used full-on chain choke chains on our dogs, and it was complete compulsion. We pulled down on the lead, we pushed on the shoulders, we pushed on the butt. It was full-on compulsion. I've gone from that to free shaping and capturing a lot of behaviors. And it's made a huge difference in what I can do with my dog. And I want to share that with other people. I don't want to turn them off. And I think, preaching to them about, no, you shouldn't ever do this is not going to work. And, I think there's some people you can approach at the right time. And I think sometimes showing them, placing, like Nick getting his rally novice in 4 attempts, I think, says something about, and it was more my fault than his fault with the NQ. But I think that we're not going to meet people and we're not going to teach people that there's a better way if we get all aggro on them and don't meet them where they're at. And that's, I'm not going to teach Nick using compulsion when we start doing hunting. I won't do it. I'll make sure he has a really good recall. I'll make sure that he's got a really good retrieve, which he does. And, go from there. But I don't think that calling people out for the way they train, it helps anybody.
That's totally me too. So I'm a firm believer in, if you want to think of it a little bit as religion or even sexuality, as same as dog training, I believe that everybody has to make the choice of what's right for them. So I know what my religion is, full out 100% Christian, and I'm comfortable in that. But if somebody claims to be something else, I'm totally fine with their choice for what they want to believe in. And the same goes for dog training. I'm totally comfortable in other people making the choices that are right for them. So if they're making a choice that's wrong, depending on the relationship I have with them, if I know them really, really well and count them as a friend, like I do Cindy, and sorry, Sarah, I just don't know you that well, but and Ashlyn. So if I see somebody that I count as a friend and really know, and they're doing something that I adamantly think is wrong, I have no problem telling them because they
Like
know me and they know how to interpret it. But if there's somebody,
shock collar on,
right, if you put a shock collar on Nick, I'd be talking to you about it. But if somebody doesn't know me and I have that kind of reaction to them, they're not going to get to know me either. So I'm not going to be able to help them. So I will say that, like, I totally detest shock and prong collars, but there has been in one situation where I felt a prong collar was appropriate for the situation. And in this particular case, it was a person with a mobility disability, tongue twister there. So she had a very hard time remaining on 2 feet, but she could do it somewhat. And she had a Mastiff in the middle of adolescence. So as a puppy, she had gone to a different trainer, and that trainer had put a prong on the puppy, and the puppy was thoroughly trained in it well. So it really made me nervous at first. And after working with her for a little while, I saw that she almost never, ever, ever did any kind of collar yank on this poor puppy. The puppy was right about a year old when I met them. So even though he was wearing a prong and a harness, she never did a collar correction on him ever. It was more or less there for if he all of a sudden saw that squirrel and took off, she could remain standing. And that was the only way she used it. So she did have a dual clip as well. And she was trying to, because she didn't like the prong any more than anyone else does, she was trying to wean him off of that. But because of his age and her disability, she wasn't quite comfortable in it in a new environment around other dogs and wildlife or, any kind of stimulating environment. And she was very adamant about, I want to be able to get rid of this one day. So she doesn't need me to harp on it in that case. She knows what can happen if it's used improperly. She's doing her best to use it as properly as she can, but she's also trying to be safe for her and everyone else in the community. If this Mastiff that's a crazy teenager decides to charge another dog, even in a friendly fashion, she needs to be able to stop him. So I totally understood that one. But that's one in like the hundreds of people I've seen using them. So
I had that issue with Poe because she went through a stage where she was growling it wasn't that she hadn't been properly trained to use a gentle leader. She knew that it meant she couldn't misbehave with the gentle leader like Nick. And I asked all these people about what can I do besides a prong? I don't want to put her in a prong. and I asked every trainer I knew, I asked at different stores, I asked online. Nobody had well, you can put her in a harness. Well, I'm sorry, but 120-pound Great Pyrenees that's acting out with front and rear clip is still going to pull me on the ground. So, but nobody had told me about the whole thing about putting the gentle leader on and the harness, because I could have gotten her out with the clip on her collar and then clipped it to the harness and the gentle leader. So when Nick started acting up, I got the same response across the board: gentle leader or a harness front and back. I got and then followed by a prong. And I'm like, no, prong, we're not. I promised Nick I wasn't going to put a prong on him. So that's when I started doing the absolute dog stuff. And, I had tried the prong with him. He didn't care. And the absolute dog stuff I tried, and it, then they popped up a couple videos and they showed the head halter with the harness on, with it clipped to the harness on the back. That's what allowed me to fix him. And we did that until last November, and we were at the dog show in Morgan Hill, and lo and behold, I could just do the head halter.
It's all a process, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a process, but we're getting to the point. I took him out to the park today on just a flat collar. I mean, which is huge because there's squirrels and geese everywhere. There's every single distraction that he reacts to, and he's like, okay, whatever.
That's one of the reasons I started like my crazy teenage adolescent course stuff, because so many people don't provide owners of adolescent dogs with the resources they need. Now, I'm never going to suggest that somebody put a prong collar on a dog, because I think there's better ways. But if somebody's already using one, I also don't want to force them to take that off. If we're force-free trainers, we also have to be force-free with the people we're hoping to train.
Exactly. And the other thing you can do is teach them how to use it so that you're not using it as a pop jerk correction, but you're using it where you're using it passively. Maybe your hand slides down the leash, you don't jerk it, but they pull on it, and it's their action that makes the correction, not your action. You just held the leash firm.
Yeah, I'm still not a fan of that, only because
I'm not
I've worked
either,
with too
but
many reactive dogs, and I see prong collars making dogs more and more reactive all the time. Because in the moment, if they see another dog that they're reacting to, they don't realize whether they're pulling on the
No.
leash or you're pulling on the leash. Not in that
No.
moment. So, yes, people can do it in ways that are less harsh, but I would prefer to teach them a better approach.
Yeah, well, I like to
with
have
compassion
the dog
for them.
Yeah, I like to have the dog in closer to me so that there's less chance for acting out, because if they're in closer, they're not going to be swinging at 6 feet. They're going to be trying to swing at your knee, and there's a better option to get them into a sit or something so that they can learn some self-control.
Right. So we haven't heard from Ashlyn. Ashlyn, I just want to let you know our topic for tonight is kind of bridging the gap between, and we said force-free to balance, but we really extended that further, like the far extreme of force-free to even the far extreme of alpha-based trainers, and everything in between. So I do have, just because I was talking and we only have 6 minutes, I wanted to share a saying that I got from another behavior consultant that I really like. So he says, we as trainers, we all need to have CAKE. So CAKE is an acronym. So C is compassion. We all need to have compassion. awareness for A, knowledge, that's our science-based approach, and empathy for the other people. Everybody's got to start somewhere. They live in their own truth of what they feel is right. So we have to have empathy to understand that truth. And I don't know, I really, really love the way he put all of those together so that we're not just forcing our beliefs on them, but we're considering the people's emotions as well as, we always talk about the dog's emotions, but we need to consider the people's emotions and how we can help steer them towards better ways without telling them they have to be better.
I'm going to dig up a link to an article that Ken Ramirez wrote about meeting other training groups, where they are on their struggle on their journey from traditional to force-free training. That was really interesting, because there's still a lot of people out there that that don't that are still very balanced to the other side, and they really get offended by force-free trainers.
I'm just answering Ashlyn's questions. Anything else you want to talk about, Cindy, or any other questions? We have 4 minutes left. Or does anybody else have anything they want to add to the discussion?
Sarah, I thought you'd be the most interesting, since you live in that land of not force-free people that I'm entering into, of learning to deal with your dog when there's it's not force-free.
Well, at risk of offending everyone, I think there's some force-free trainers have a lot more in common with compulsion-based trainers than they do with people who enjoy playing with their dogs and having a good
I
time.
totally agree. Do we want to restart this and discuss that? That would be a really good point to discuss.
I'm happy to do that. Lyra just came in too. So what happens is that we run out of time with any more than 2 people talking. So the same link you just used to come on, I'll end the meeting, I'll restart it and use that same link to pop right back on. And then we will have another 45 minutes that we can chat if we want to. So welcome, Lyra. And everybody else, but welcome, Lyra, who just came on.
Welcome, Lyra.
And let's hang up and we'll see you all back here in just a moment.
Okay. Yeah.
But I think pretty much we're all back except for Ashlyn, and it might be too late for her. So if you want to restart the discussion, I'll cut out everything that we've said previously on this half. So.
Okay. So hi, Lyra. You may or may not want to show your face. It's totally up to you. So just before we switch over to this, it's actually the same link. And this is a safe space. You can have your own opinion and nobody's going to be offended by it. And we don't have to agree on anything, but
we all agree to be kind to everybody, regardless of whether we agree on the belief we're discussing or not.
So we all to be and to be respectful as well.
Yes.
Because the topic we're discussing tonight is, dealing. And I realize you're somewhat probably on the newer scale of being on this journey from using more force to less force with your dogs. And her dogs are Bjorn and Lyra and
Luna.
So we have 2 Lunas that come. So there's a variety, there's everybody somewhere on this journey. And over, I want to say it's 30 to 40 years, dog training has changed significantly. There's still a lot of people stuck with one foot in the past that use a lot of aversive to teach or to reprimand their dog or forcefully train their dog to do something. But the science shows that you can get the same to much significantly better results by using a force-free approach. And so tonight we're discussing where we're all on at that on that journey and how we handle being around other people that are not in the same spot. And
That's a very good way to wrap that up, to explain that, we're all on a journey in our dog training journey, but we may
Yeah.
not all be in the same location.
And
So-
so one of the things that tends to happen with force-free trainers is they kind of get like the best description I can give is evangelical Christians. I hope nobody's going to get offended by this, but the ones that are out there, praise the Lord, hallelujah, and they're passing out Bibles and making sure that they're really worried about your soul and whether you're going to go to hell or not, and they want to save you and save the world and make sure you don't get a 666 tattoo. And
they're more interested in telling you what you're doing wrong than helping you with
what's going
to do
on.
right.
And then there's the people that have been actually doing it for a while, and they tend to be a little bit more low key, and they want to help you, but they don't necessarily want to like ram it down your throat.
And I think most of us here tonight fit in that category of we want to help. That's our goal, to help people. We see both sides of the coin to an extent. We understand why people use adversives. We just know that that's not what we're going to do with our dogs.
Right. Well, like tonight, I was using a little bit of, I guess, I was not letting Nick do something he wanted to do. And I think we're getting into the negative.
The non-reward markers?
No, so he wanted to go after a cat, so I was making him sit. Because I'm trying to make him sit when he sees something he wants to go after, so that becomes a cue to sit. And so that he'll hold a sit when we get out in the field. So he didn't like it, because I held the collar firm. Granted, he's on a flat collar, and he knows that if he's been trained, if I say sit, he better get his butt on the ground. And that's just kind of an automatic habit. So we had to do probably 10 sits in less than 100 yards for him to get back in the house, because he was smelling cats and squirrels and everything else. But there's also people on the other side of things that are very vocal about how horrible and untrained and it doesn't work. I think Learberg wrote a paper about how you can't use positive reinforcement to train a dog for hunt tests, and then he contradicted himself by saying there's certain types of trainers that could do it.
Well, okay. So
I'll find it.
Here's my thing. So like, okay, people are like, the science says positive reinforcement is best, but most of those studies are super, super freaking basic. It's can the dog sit? Can the dog behave around livestock? That kind of thing. And I think if someone truly believes that their training method is the best, as most positive reinforcement trainers do, I think they should put their money where their mouth is and get out there and win. That's something that has not and likely will not happen in the US retriever field trial world. It just won't. Because for a dog to run straight for 400 yards and straight back, it's not going to work.
You and
So
I
you
have a
have to
goal.
decide, are you going to do that or are you going to do something else?
You and I have a goal.
I do know that there are two ladies over in the UK, and I can find their names for you if you want to research them. I don't deal with hunting dogs,
So Lauren,
so that's not me.
so
But
Lauren is one.
yeah, I know they work together and they're like a tag team thing, but they do hunt training, supposedly 100% force free by their
Yeah,
claims.
and I'm
So-
not arguing with that. Like even in the US, our hunt tests for retrievers can be done force free. And like a UK retriever field trial can, because they allow the dog to use their nose and not take a straight line. But there's just,
Right.
I don't know.
And I
There's
wasn't
some
saying you
different
disagreed with it. I was just saying you might be
Yeah.
interested to hear from them because I know
Well-
hunt training is your thing. So you might be
What-
interested in like the talk they gave on I don't know if you're familiar with Andrew Hale. He's one of my like right now he's one of my all-time favorite behavioral consultants. And that is, I got an extra video starting in the background. Hold on. But so he did an interview with them. So they had some really good information, and I can share that link with you if you're interested in. That's all I was saying. I wasn't trying to say
okay.
that they say
totally.
it's possible. I was just saying you might be interested in them.
But
That
I'll
is
find
definitely
that
an
article.
area of interest for me.
I'll
Right.
find the Weirberg article, because what he was saying was that basically the pet type, like the two types of groups that don't take it real serious could never do it. But the people who actually listen and pay attention and train their dogs could do it. So that says, okay, so those two groups that he mentioned couldn't do it are the two groups that probably couldn't train any dog to pass a hunt test. So, okay, my dog's licking
Yeah.
something.
I
Yeah,
really
I do
hate
think
any
I
kind
do
of
think it
thing that like
takes a
lumps
certain-
people into groups or assigns titles to certain things. Even assigning the title reactive to dogs. I mean, in my mind, all dogs are reactive in some form or another. Just because they're choosing to stay at your side and not pull at the distraction, they're still reacting to it. They're just choosing a reaction that's more appropriate in the eyes of a human. We
Well,
as people react to everything. Something's hot, we pull our hand away from it. You're reacting to it.
some people are more reactive to the environment and startle more easy or have responses more easy and, end up with full-on PTSD as a response to the environment.
Same with dogs.
Same with dogs. But if you don't have those reactions, you're not alive. So I put something on the Rec Spec page about using the Ear Pro on my reactive service dog. And somebody starts going, oh, your service dog can't be reactive. And I said, if he wasn't reactive, he wouldn't be alive.
Right. Well, and that's
So-
just it. People think of reactive as the negative reactions, and that's what the term
Right.
reactive has been used as for so long, even though it's not really a true definition of that word.
And
That's
Well-
what people tend to think.
I think there's a big difference between reactive and aggressive.
True.
There's different
True.
kinds of reactivity, and for a service dog, it's unacceptable for them to be aggressive or disruptive. So whatever kind of reactivity they're having can't be disruptive or aggressive.
right, but so in the case, like the first show I went to, we took the trailer, and on one side of us, they had dogs right next to our trailer that the groomer brought in. They were giant schnauzers, and they started barking at 5 o'clock in the morning. And Nick started reacting to that. Well, there's dogs barking, I'm going to bark too. So I had my Ear Pro and I stuck it on him, and he crawled in between us and curled up and stayed in bed till 7 o'clock. And then I took him out. That's a reaction. That's a reaction to other dogs barking. And that's okay. but we also have to recognize that our dogs, as they're going through teenage, are going, and some of them are going to do it more than others. They're going to be reactive. And there's things we can do to fix it. And sometimes it takes longer than others. And, you know, like I said, my goal is to help you make sure Bjorn gets through this and can be the most effective service dog you have. And I'm reasonably certain, based on what's happened with Nick, that we can do this.
Yeah. And I feel more confident in the fact of his reactivity not being aggressive reactivity. You know, when he's allowed to actually get up close and approach the thing he's being reactive with, he gets excited and playful. It's not, I want to attack or cause harm.
Right. And, you know, sometimes we'll pull Penny in if we need to.
Right.
And-
And we've talked a little bit, but yeah, my last service dog was very reactive, not aggressive, but reactive. She liked to use her voice, so she would bark, and mostly bark at home. Like, she very rarely barked outside of home unless we were like on a nature trail walking. But you know, there's a point when you want a German Shepherd to bark on a trail. You know, if there's a bear close and a dog barks, that bear normally goes the other way. So barking is not always bad, as long as it's not barking in inappropriate environments.
And they're still allowed to bark one or two times in a theater, you know, inside, alerting, and wherever
I think the ADA says one alert type bark.
Yeah, but that could be woof woof.
Right.
Doesn't have to be woof. It could be, if the dog says woof woof, it could be that's what the dog says.
Even though I think people should train other behaviors for alerts,
Oh, I do
it's
too.
totally allowed.
Or
Mhm.
someone could be what's the word, provoking your dog to bark, and as long as you're taking action to correct it and get them back under control, that's also okay.
Right, but that's the situation. If somebody's provoking your dog to bark, that's where you should be heading towards the manager, you know. And we got Ashlyn back. Yay!
Hey,
Hi,
Ashlyn.
Ashlyn. We are the Muppet. We are the Muppet Theater now.
Yeah, we might sound like that sometimes.
Yeah, having kids like barking at your dog, for instance.
Well, that's why we want to train against that stuff. We want to train our dogs. They can respond to be as, you know, non-responsive as possible. And that's why I keep talking to you about the concepts we need to work on to build that non-responsive, so they go, oh, you're none of my business. And that's what I'm working with Nick. And I'm actually seeing that, because we're getting pretty close to squirrels, and he's going, oh, you're none of my business. And
which is still a response.
Yeah, it's still a response. He's still alive.
It's just not a response that anybody around you is going to notice except for you.
Right. I mean, today he had a couple issues. I went out and sat on the pool deck. I'm being a horrible person. So there's this big no pet sign on the pool deck, but it's the only place where there's chairs to sit outside, and my back deck is too hot in the afternoon to sit out on. So I took him over to the pool deck, and I'm sitting on the pool deck, and I'm wanting him to dry off because I gave him a bath. And this one lady that walked by, she looked like she was going to report to the manager, and I really didn't care, because a variety of reasons. She had to take a course about why my dog is a service dog, and she couldn't ask for more information. So I had him sitting on the pool deck drying while I'm just kind of hanging out there. And nobody else was out there. And had somebody said something to me, I'm like, well, he can be out here. He doesn't have to be labeled. He's a service dog. He's not an ESA. And, you know, that's where that is. But I was also working with him because there's so many more people that walk by. And he has an issue with that. Well, that's a really good place to do it because there's lots of people that walk by. And I can sit in there and we're in a contained area and there's no way he can get out of there. And I had him actually strapped to the chair I was sitting in, so he wasn't going to go in the pool. So, but no, service dogs have to have, they can respond. We want to get them to that nice neutral middle where they're not like, except Sarah's dog, he needs to be able to respond so he can tell her what's going on.
Yeah, there are reasons where a
always
dog
gets me
might
is
need to
people say
bark due to a
reactivity.
disability.
Well, he does, fancy stuff when needed and, his jumps and things.
Yeah, I guess I'm so used to thinking of reactivity in terms of hearing dogs, like you want the reactivity to sounds and that's what you're looking for. So I'm always like, oh yeah, people are talking about like barking. Whoops. Not just noticing stuff.
Which again is why I hate labels.
Yeah.
It means different things to different people. And
I'm
that's
one,
why I hate the term balanced. As I said earlier, I hate the idea of the word balanced trainers
we're not even
because
gonna
those
get
people are really just in a different training journey, in a different place on the line somewhere. But we
Yeah.
are all on that line somewhere between 100% force free and I don't think anybody is 100% aversive based training, but we're all
No,
kind
they're
of
out
somewhere
there.
on that line in our own
Our
place.
own-
We were discussing one of the local trainers at class the other day, and everybody knew him. And I was like, oh, I know him. And they're like, you know him? That was around 20 years ago. That was at a kennel we used to use. And it was all pop and jerk. And, if they're out there, there's certain sports that tend to be more forced than others. The bite sports tend to be more forceful. I don't think there's much shaping that goes on there.
Like any sport, or any competition, you're going to have people that choose to be more aversive and people that choose to be as force free as possible. So
Right. And it also tends to be when the sports were developed, like agility came out right about the same time that clicker training really became popular. So when agility came out, agility is almost 100% force-free training for training agility. And
Well,
you get
go ahead.
a big red flag is somebody asking to use an e-collar on an agility dog.
Right. I was just going to say that you also have the fact that agility is often very self-reinforcing for the dog. And that type of thing is easier to train in a force-free way when the dogs
Right.
find that instant gratification just from completing the run.
Oh yeah. Well,
Whereas hunting can also be self-reinforcing for the dog, but it may not be right in the beginning when you're trying to teach the basics that you have to eventually link all together for a hunting dog, so eventually it's going to be self-rewarding, but it may not start out self-rewarding.
But
what's weird to me is, especially retriever people in the US, is they focus on the self-rewarding aspect until the dog turns 6 months old. And then they're like, no more. I'm like, dude, it was working for 6 months.
Yeah. If it's not
That's
broke,
weird.
you don't fix it.
And they're bred to retrieve. I mean, and what gets me is that the poodles are not encouraged to do more retrieving. I mean, that's what they were bred to do.
Yeah, but poodle owners now tend to be more about show and name and title than they do functionality.
It's because the Poodle Club of America does not support hunting. It's not because poodle owners don't want it. It's the club leadership that doesn't want it. Ashlyn's got like 4 messages.
Oh, nope, just one. Lily has the hunting dog instinct.
Yep.
Azul has a little bit of it. He's got some golden retriever in him. So he's got a little bit of that hunting dog instinct, but all of his life I've tried to teach him that he hunts the things I provide, such as that tug toy or the toy on the end of the flirt pole, or, all things that interact with me versus hunting the things that might just pop up in our environment, like the deer, the squirrel, that kind of thing.
The antelope.
Yeah.
Aaron was really good at barn hunt.
I have an amazing barn for that. And I had thought about
Okay, Penny.
possibly looking into the sport of it, which I mean, I think Azul could easily do because we play a lot of find it games and whatnot. But he just enjoys exploring the barn and just sniffing about. So that's kind of like his happy time. And I just let him check out and not have to worry about anything other than his basic manners when he's in the barn.
So how far are you from Oshkosh?
At least 4 hours, if not 5 hours.
Okay.
Somewhere
Well, if we get to
between there.
Oshkosh, we can get to your house.
Yeah. If you go to Oshkosh, I'll come down and pick you up.
Well, there's a little problem with Oshkosh. It's called a fly-in.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I mean, we got to recognize what our dogs are bred for. And if you know your dog is bred to retrieve, teach it to retrieve. Use that for a reward. But just when I think back to stuff we were taught when I was in 4-H, I want to cringe. I mean, it was not nice. It was like hanging dogs, and it was just.
I started out that way too. Most of us did at some point in our lives.
Well, if you're
especially for our generation.
Yeah. If you're over 45, you probably started out that way. Because I didn't see it until I was in my 30s or so when I got my Newfoundland, my first expensive dog. But it really makes a difference, I think, in the dog's personality and their relationship with you.
Right. And that's one of the things that so often doesn't get talked about in the force-free training world is the relationship. So many people think that force-free trainers are, well, the dog does whatever they want, whenever they want, however they want. But the whole idea for me is to develop that relationship so the dogs are making choices that fit in with my likes and dislikes.
And I can turn around and make them make that choice the same way. So tonight I splurged and I got a piece of cheesecake from the Cheesecake Factory. And I had it delivered. And so I was eating that, and Nick wanted a piece. And he knew it was something high value to me. And he hadn't brought me my glucometer because my glucometer was not where I would put it for him to bring. So he gave me my glasses. So when he gave me my glasses, I had given him some chicken because he gave me something. Then I realized he wanted to be paid the optimal value for giving me something when he was. So I gave him a bite. Well, then he just stood here. And I didn't tell him to go to his mat. And usually I tell him to go to his mat when he just stands here and stares at my food. And usually he goes to his mat or goes someplace else. And I really don't care. I just don't want him staring at my food at that point because he's like the little kid staring at your food. So we shared the piece of cheesecake. And, okay, so I know Sarah feeds her dog off her fork, and reasonably certain Penny feeds her dog off her fork.
And that's kind of funny too, because like I'll feed Azul off my fork and then turn around and eat off the fork again.
Oh yeah.
When it comes to Cam, he doesn't get fed off my fork until I'm done eating. But he's a sloppy eater and he makes a mess. Azul doesn't touch my fork when he takes something off my fork. So
Oh,
Cam
Hoda
only gets it off the fork when I'm totally done. But yes.
doesn't come near the table because she's never been fed anywhere near where I'm eating. So, I mean, and I can leave pizza sitting on the ottoman and Bo will leave it.
I took a lot of flack for that when I started feeding Azul from my plate when I was eating. Let me say, when I first started it, he was feeding kibble. I was feeding him kibble when I was eating, which is what I just did with Puppy Roz. But he hit a certain age that the kibble wasn't reinforcing enough. And so if
Right.
I was eating something that he liked, some kind of meat or something, I would give him teeny small pieces of it for holding his downstay on his mat beside my chair while I was eating. And
And some,
my son would especially, you're just teaching him to stare at you. No, I'm teaching him to hold his downstay calmly at my feet. Most of the time when I fed him, he wasn't looking at me. He was either doing a chin rest on my foot or, chewing on a toy or licking himself or anything other than looking at me. So
right.
he's amazing at that. And now I don't do that very often, but he still lays at my feet and he almost always gets the last bite of whatever I'm eating.
Well,
And
right. And like
because he lays there the whole time.
I'm teaching that alert. So I want him to come over and give me something, preferably what I want when I'm eating, because that's supposed to be the trigger to hand me something. And
Right.
he did. He basically did it. I just didn't have what he was supposed to give to me. So, it was a paired behavior and I needed to respond appropriately. It's you reward the behavior you want. And that doesn't, I think Lyra and I talked a little bit about this yesterday. We had a very long
Like a
consult.
3-hour talk.
That's okay. I didn't have anything else to do. But we talked about rewarding the behaviors you want. And you want the dog to stay on the bed, you drip the kibble on the bed. You want the dog to stay someplace else, you drip the kibble over there.
You
And
want
you
the
start
dog to
out,
stay off of your bed? Then you don't feed him on your bed.
right.
You
And
don't pet him on your bed.
I gotta
Eventually they
tell you
learn
about
there's no value for your bed. Now my
if
Oh,
dog
I'm
I'm
having
going,
Azul's
opposite
on my bed
problem.
right now with my husband. So
my goal is to have my dog sleep on my bed, but I think I have to get one of those child bumper guards because multiple times he's fallen off the bed, including last night.
I guarantee you Bjorn would fall off the bed. He likes to sleep on his back.
Azul won't go near the edge.
Well, he had his feet towards me and his back towards the edge. And so I'm just, trying to figure out what the best solution to this is. But
I think we got way off of our, how do you deal with somebody when they have a difference of opinion in training style? But I think we've had some good conversation as well. Talked a little bit about some different things in dog training that, we might be considered the black sheep for, which I'm okay with that. If you haven't followed either Cindy or I for a while, you may not know that we're rapidly becoming the crazy old ladies of dog training because we're both over 50. We say what we think and
we're
never
not
know what's
worried
going to come
about
out of our
it.
mouths.
And we're not worried about saying what we think because we've both been training long enough, maybe not always professionally, but we've been training long enough that, we can we can pick things out, what's going on.
And we may be worried about saying what we want to say in a compassionate way or a non-offensive way, but we'll still say whatever it is that needs to be said.
And we will always have closed captioning, unlike some other dog training programs.
Even if the names don't come out right.
Yes, that's what I want to see, the smile.
We have
So-
5 minutes left. Does anybody else have anything they want to add, either about the topic of being in their journey on that training line where they're at, or the topic that we've recently been talking about, the things we do that other trainers might disagree with?
Is it truly force free if you're using coercion?
Yeah,
No.
I mean, yes, you're not using coercion. Because you're rewarding the behavior, because you're breaking the steps down small enough. So even if you're luring, you're breaking the steps down so that they learn what they're doing. And then you're rewarding. So like when you were in grade school and you got an A on a math paper, and you got the A and you got the smiley face on your math paper, that's and then you that's your reward for getting the A on the math paper. That's not coercion.
Yeah,
This
see,
is
I was thinking
basically
of
the same
coercion in a
thing.
totally different way.
So
The bribery, I guess.
Yeah.
no,
Maybe
it's not.
better word.
Bribery is like, here's the candy bar and I'm going to give it to you, but
If you do this thing, and if you don't, then you don't get it.
yeah, and we're not going to just give them the candy bar, but we're going to, we're going to try and make them the goal is to help them be as successful as possible.
Teach them the behaviors that you want them to repeat.
Mhm.
So yeah, and I don't use a whole lot of food in my training. I have for some dogs in the past or different things, but like the Zool is not really food motivated. I still want to find some way of reinforcing any behavior he's given me that is the behavior I want. And so for him, because I've worked so hard with that and delayed reinforcement, that I can pretty much tell him, good boy, or even the word thank you, or man, what a rock star you are, something like that, because he knows that later, as soon as we finish whatever it is we're working on, he's going to get something better. And to him, his best things are being able to be pet by a person or being able to go on a sniff about. So I may not be able to give him something good to sniff after every good behavior, but the verbal praise lets him know that, hey, that's adding up and you're going to get a long walk when we're done. So
Yeah,
it's a
and
bribery of sorts.
well, no, it's like a paycheck.
Exactly.
It's like a paycheck. So you go to work every day, you do your job, and you get paid at the end of the week.
Help me through the grocery store,
Help
and
me
when
get
we're
through the
done, we'll
grocery
find
store.
someplace fun to sniff.
Right. And, it's different things for different dogs. Different dogs find different things rewarding. And, but they need to be able to, like, somebody was saying to me, there was a discussion not too long about rally and dog treats, because you don't use treats in the ring in an AKC competition. It's like, no, but yeah, I'll use treats and I'll carry treats when we're training. But if I go in the ring, I can do the whole course without treats. And I'm not worried about it because I can go walk through Target, Save Mart, and Walmart and not use treats because Nick won't take them. And then I've built up enough secondary reinforcement in words like thank you, good dog, good boy, that kind of thing, that he's just he knows that I'm proud of him and I'm happy with him and he's going to get out of there, which is what he wants.
Maybe we should talk more about reinforcement next week on the trainer talk.
I
We
think
have
that
less
would
than a
be
minute right
wonderful.
now.
I think that would be a good idea. And Lyra, if you want to talk about it tomorrow, I don't have much time until the evening because I got to take Nick in for OFAs. So
I want to thank everybody for being here. It's much nicer to have a few people chatting about a topic than it is just Cindy and I.
yes.
Cindy and I could talk all night. So if these go kind of long, we're sorry. You're always welcome to drop out if you need to or come and go as you need to. No worries. But yes, we enjoy these trainer talks. We hope you guys do as well.
Yes, thank you for joining us. We do appreciate it. And we hope you guys are getting stuff out of it. And Lyra, I'm really glad you came.
Thank you.